Today, I think it's a very different India, which is full of confidence. There's a sense of our time has come.
Life in India has changed profoundly over the past couple of decades, thanks in no small part to technology and outsourcing services that made India the office to the world. Today, this vast country of more than 1.4 billion people is nearing the most significant milestone in its social and economic development. The unprecedented digitalization that makes it possible for Indians to access financial services, healthcare, education, and commerce in ways that seemed impossible only a few years ago. Nandan Nilekani, co-founder of one of India's leading technology companies, Infosys, is one of the visionaries behind India's digitalization. He spearheaded Aadhaar, the world's largest biometric ID system, and is leading the development of India Stack, the public, decentralized digital infrastructure that is the backbone of India's transformation. As Morgan Stanley's chief equity strategist in India, I've been following this mega trend since its beginning. I was eager to speak with Nandan about how the idea unfolded and where it's going. So I sat down with him at his offices in Bangalore, where we talked about his vision, not just for India, but for much of the developing world. Hello Nandan, it's great to have you here. You're best known for being the co-founder and current chairman of Infosys, a little lesser known for all the best-selling books you've written. You're also a pioneering philanthropist in this country. But we are here to discuss about your work on India's digitalization. When you founded Infosys, India was very different from what it is today. What is it that has struck you the most about the change that has happened in the last 3 decades?
It was a very different India at that time, much before economic reforms. Business was hard to do. We had to convince people about why a bunch of first-generation guys could start a company, because Infosys was India's original startup in that sense. Today, I think it's a very different India, which is full of confidence, where people graduating from our colleges like IITs want to start companies here. There's a sense of our time has come.
Was there a light bulb moment when you realized you could use your resources to reboot India?
I first started contributing to governance when I did something called the Bangalore Agenda Task Force. And what I realized was that it's a different way of doing things from the private sector. I learned a lot. And I thought technology was not relevant to government. But after 3-4 years of doing it, I realized that the only way to solve this is through technology. So I was convinced that technology could contribute. And that's why when I got this opportunity to join the government and lead the Aadhaar project, I just took it and said, okay, let me see what I can do.
While you're on the subject of Aadhaar, talk about India Stack. It's not an app. It's not a platform. What exactly is India Stack?
Think about India Stack just like the internet or GPS, which everybody uses, but it's behind the scenes. It's digital public infrastructure. And India Stack is a set of layered capabilities that India has built over the last 15 years, each of which is at population scale, at very low cost, accessible on your fingertips on your phone, and all interoperating with each other. So the overall thing creates a capability for the country to do innovation, which can then be done in different sectors.
What inspired the idea?
Well, the idea was definitely something which I thought about deeply. I wrote about it in my first book, Imagining India, that a digital ID would help in many ways. I talked about like benefit transfers and all that. That's how I actually ended up with this job. So the government had independently set up a committee to do something about unique IDs way back in 2006. They didn't think of it as a digital ID, it was unique ID. I think the value add that I did and the team is let's do it for the future, do it digitally, do it on the cloud, and do it with platform thinking and APIs. So it's just like GPS answered the question, where am I? Aadhaar would answer the question, who am I?
Is there any other parallel in the world?
Large companies have ID platforms, a big part of the internet story. But there's no public digital infrastructure at this scale which 1.3 billion people use and which is available with open APIs. So you can construct users and applications on top.
So digitalization has brought about sweeping social change in India. Could you share some examples with our viewers on how it is changing the lives of people?
I think that many things are happening. One is the ID itself drove inclusion because people now could actually show their IDs. We built something called KYC, Know Your Customer, which you can open a bank account or get a mobile connection. And then the government launched the Jandan Yojana program to make financial inclusion ubiquitous, and few hundred million people own bank accounts. And the way they were able to do that was by using the KYC. So the electronic KYC accelerated financial inclusion, which allowed more people to participate in the economy. So Aadhaar eKYC then became the instrument of access for citizens into the banking system and into the mobile industry. So this combination of everybody having an ID, more and more people having a smartphone with cheap data, and a low-cost payment system drove the whole digital revolution post-2016.
And are there examples in healthcare, education?
I think there's a broad consensus in India across political leaders, bureaucrats, technocrats, entrepreneurs that technology is the only way we can leapfrog in many of these areas. So absolutely, the government's Diksha program, which enabled millions of teachers to learn, it's all rolled out in the pandemic when the children couldn't come to school. On health, there's this whole plan to create a health stack, to create interoperable electronic health records.
Let me take the clock back to the first decade of the millennium when Aadhaar was formally launched. You must have had a vision about India Stack then. How have we fared versus that vision?
Well, I think I had a vague idea that using digital ID as a foundation, that's why it's called Aadhaar, which means foundation, opening it up with APIs to build applications, creating a KYC to accelerate financial inclusion and mobile inclusion. I think that was very clear.
One of the best use cases of India Stack globally known is UPI, which is Unified Payments Interface. Can we talk a little bit about that?
The idea of UPI was brewing in our heads in those days. The first meeting on UPI happened only in 2013. And then we saw the rapid rise of smartphones. And then we realized that if you can bring a mobile-first payment system and attach it to the growth of the phone, then you're going to create massive e-commerce capabilities. So I think that's by that time we had figured that out. We had obviously figured out the bank connection and the government transfers because that was the main reason for doing it. But later on we realized that these things can be combined in ways that we didn't even think about. If you make these digital public infrastructure at scale and enable it to be used by different entrepreneurs and so on, it creates new possibilities. So now we are at that stage where I'm seeing new innovations which I had not thought about, which is the sign that it's working.
Innovations like open network, digital commerce.
Yes, I think there are 3-4 things happening which are very exciting. One is, of course, ONDC. Once ONDC goes up at scale, hyper-local commerce will become very easy to do. So you can sit in your house on your app and order some instant groceries or toothpaste or whatever you want from the neighborhood kirana because he'll have connected into ONDC. And it will allow everyone to participate in commerce. Then there is the democratization of credit. India's credit to GDP ratio is much lower than many countries, and a lot of it goes to big guys because for the lender, the knowledge asymmetry and costs of dealing with a small borrower is too high. So they don't give them the loans. Now, what we are seeing is that once you're digital, you have digital footprints. What payments you received, what invoices you pay, ordered, and so on. All this is what we call as information collateral. So instead of using asset collateral, use information collateral to get access to credit. So suddenly you're going to democratize credit at population scale. And then there's a big AI thing, which is going to change India dramatically.
Does AI pose a threat to India Stack or is it complementary?
No, it's absolutely complementary. AI is, India Stack is infrastructure. There are many AI use cases. The amplification of human capability with AI to deliver services to a lot more people. That's one big thing which we think will happen, which will have a big impact. If you have a shortage of teachers, how do you get the best teaching to every child? You can use AI to make that happen. If you have a shortage of doctors and nurses, how do we get the best medical treatment to every patient? The other big thing is languages. For 22 Indian languages, they're going to create the complete open capability to translate speech to speech, speech to text, text to speech, all that. And suddenly every Indian will be able to talk or write or read in their language to somebody else who's in another language.
Are you seeing any other country attempt something like this? Given India's roaring success, are there other countries that think that they need their own stack?
I think there is definitely a much better understanding in the world of digital public infrastructure. And definitely people are realizing the value of this. But the challenge is, how do you do it strategically over 5-10 years? And how do you build these building blocks? And then how do you make these building blocks interoperate? That's the hard part.
Highlight this book that you have recently written, The Art of Bitfulness. So what would you recommend to our viewers to stay calm in this very hyper digital world?
My thesis is we should use technology, but in a way that you control the technology and the technology doesn't control you. So the art of bitfulness is really about how to stay calm and what are some of the practices you can have. So it's just a way of saying technology is great, but use it in proper doses.
What's the next big thing for Nandan Nilekani?
No, actually, I don't think like that. I just think about doing new things. I'm deeply looking at how AI will change the industry. It's a structural paradigm shift. So that's at the Infosys level. I really want to make sure that this AI journey happens well. But otherwise, how do I take digital public infrastructure global? How do we get more and more countries to adopt this as fundamental to their future? That's what I like to focus on.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Great, thank you.